Call to order. What? May I please stand for the pledge? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Okay. Mr. Snodderly?
You.
Mr. Wallace?
Here.
Tim? Oh, sorry. Mr. Bizarre. Sorry. Mrs. Hurst is Mrs. Hurst absent? Okay. Mrs. Conforti is here. 4 with 1 absent. Okay. Information and discussion, the CSBA Annual Education Conference. I wanted to get people's views on what they thought about going for them, if it's something that you'd like to do as a board separately. Do you have some input?
No,
Vern?
not going.
You're not going. Okay.
Is this year, is it in San Francisco?
No,
Where is it?
No, it's in
San
San Diego.
I'd probably skip it then.
you skip it then. Okay. I'm at betwixt and between. There are some things I would really like to go because one, I'd like to support Paul. 2, I'd like to know what their schedule of things that are happening. Do we know what the program is?
Not at this time. It's probably a
It's too
few
early.
months away from
Yeah.
being released. The registration opens tomorrow, I believe it is. And if we don't jump on reservations quickly, you find yourself walking to
Right,
the
2
conference.
miles.
So that's why I brought it to this special meeting, because I wanted to, if we were going to go, I wanted to make sure I got registration in the hotel where the convention, or near the convention center where
Mr. Posey, were you considering?
I would go if board members went. I don't know that the value of what we learned last year equaled the value of what it cost. I appreciated getting
That's
to know
what I was
everybody,
worried
and
about.
I really appreciate as a new superintendent.
Aren't they gonna do like video classes again and all that?
Yes, they are.
Oh, that,
You know, so
yeah.
Zoom it.
Yeah,
Oh.
that is totally an option to Zoom it if you want. I'm going to go anyway. It looks like with my transition from, and I'm not sure if this has happened, but Nancy, you may know a little bit about this too. It looks like I no longer need hotel rooms supplied by the district for my work at the delegate assembly and the board of directors meeting. It seems like the CSBA picks those up since I'm a director now. Is that what you found when they were working through that last one, Nancy?
I believe we still paid for the majority of the nights, and they picked up the extra night for your extra meeting. that you had.
Okay. Okay.
I haven't heard anything else, and I knew you were out of town, so I figured we would talk when you got back.
Yeah, and we're still not all the way done with getting me set up as a new director anyway. Like I don't have a CSBA email account yet that I can send all my delegates information, and I'm kind of the same as with Vern and Sean, that if there's not something particular that we're going for, I'm okay to skip one. I think go to
That's-
some, skip some is good.
That's one of the things I was, I think I'd rather not attend this year.
That's fine by me. Okay. I will,
One of the
So,
things that I would like to do though is I think that, and maybe Vern, I felt like you thought that we had some real quality discussions when we were working towards Sean's contract and hiring Sean, that there was some interesting conversations that happened with the board. And I think if those conversations happen with Sean, that would be really beneficial. I would really like to, have some sort of retreat or study session or something where we can just do some looking and talking at how things are in a little less structured environment than a meeting. And if that involves some training as well, for example, iReady, what is that capable of doing? I think something like that amongst ourselves would be valuable, but I don't know if the rest of y'all agree.
That's one of the things I was thinking of asking the board, if we wanted to get together more like a workshop or so that we're sitting there talking rather than going to meetings that I've gone to for many
Yeah,
years.
we could do a retreat or something, but I would like it to be structured. I just.
Right,
You know, these are the general topics or.
right. Not
Yeah,
just
something.
sitting around
Yeah.
and throwing something together. It'd have to be planned.
We-
But I think
We do have on the planning, is I ready to come in and do a presentation to the board, actually train the board as to what iReady does and doesn't. iReady will come in and do that as a study session. I'd be happy to throw in something like a state of the schools type of study session with that. I think it's a couple hours with iReady. So if we did it at the same time, we could then have a nice little study session on where we see the school district going and obstacles thereof, or what the wishes of the board is in certain areas, to kind of have a more of an open flowing conversation that maybe a typical board meeting lends itself to.
that's one of the things I was thinking of, because by the time there wasn't enough there for me to feel like I received a lot out of the conference. I received a lot out of us being together and
Mhm.
that, the working together. But I think we can do that here without
Sure.
expense of down there.
Ms. Betancourt, do you remember, were we doing that in September?
I'm working with iReady right now on calendaring events and workshops for next year. So I'll get together with them and see.
I know that they had told us they would come in and.
Yes, I would say September or after the first
After the first assessment.
first
so you could
diagnostic.
use
Yeah,
real
that would
data.
probably be the best time.
Okay, so then right now, we're not going to the CSBA conference and
No.
hopefully getting a workshop or some type of work place where we can talk about something more pertinent to ourselves.
Sure. And I'll keep an eye out for other conferences that might be more local that would lend itself to exactly what we talked about.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Okay. Next is the public hearing on LCAP and Mrs. Betancourt, and it's now 5:08. Okay.
Edward, we lost.
Oh, we lost.
There we go.
I'm still here. I still see you and I still hear you.
Yeah, we,
You're to the right of our screen, over in the right-hand corner. You can see. Okay, thank you, Paul. If you don't hear us, let us know.
Edward.
Nope, you guys are coming through loud and clear and I'm seeing Mrs. Betancourt's presentation showing up. And I still have you guys visible.
Good.
Oh, there it goes. Oh, but I gotta go back. Good evening. So we're back here for the LCAP again. So I wanted to start with some of the highlights that came straight from our educational partner meetings and a lot of the staff meetings that we did throughout the winter and spring. So a couple of things that were very apparent. I think one of our top items for our community was a pathway for newcomers, which could include additional staff or additional curriculum. So you'll see that in the LCAP. We also, our educational partners wanted us to continue to look at our mental health support and evaluate.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but if we could talk about what they mean by newcomers.
Oh, newcomers are anyone in the country that comes less than 1 year. So they're coming from any other country and don't speak our language and they've been in our schools less than 1 year.
So our educational stakeholders were saying that there needs to be some type of a bridge or transition program.
Yes.
That they would address them, the newcomers in the first
Yes.
year of being here.
Not knowing the language doesn't mean you can't learn the content. It just means you have to work on developing the language at the same time. So it's a struggle for some of them. And we want to provide better support, especially at the secondary. At the elementary, if you come in as a kindergartner, as a newcomer, you've got lots of support and you will learn the language. It's just the nature of kindergarten. But if you come in as a 9th or 10th grader and you don't speak the language, you're going to struggle in your science class, your math class. So we want to offer more support, and which is more staff in some ways to support those kids in their core classes. And then also maybe a class that is working to develop their language every day, all the time. It's not like you're going to learn it because you hear it. You're going to specifically target language development.
So one of the things we have to make sure is a lot of people see newcomers and they think, oh, I came from the Bay Area, I'm a newcomer.
Yeah, no.
So we're going to have to make that a very specific.
Yes, yes, yeah. And then again, a big focus from our stakeholders was that we conduct at least a needs assessment to see where we need additional supports when it comes to mental health for the students in our district. We're really excited about starting elective pathways, not just at the high school, but all the way down to kindergarten. That'll support our high school pathways once they get there. Professional development is always something you need to tackle. Things are constantly changing in education. So we need to make sure that we have professional development just for all of our teachers, staff, classified and certificated, but that we also make sure that we're focusing on those groups that need the most support, our at-risk students. We are going to have a lot of opportunities to expand our after-school programs in the coming years. So we want to look at what that, it's basically start planning what that looks like. Not everything will be done in 1 year. So it's building a program that's sustainable over time, but we want to make sure that kids are staying in school who are here from, all day, basically 6 to 6, right? 6 to 6. Have opportunities to do maybe play intramural sports that we provide in our programs, Girl Scouts, 4-H, art, physical, other health-related physical education, things that the kids, assemblies, interventions, things that our students may not have the opportunities to participate in because their families are working and working long hours. So we want to give those opportunities at the school sites.
At this point, the state is giving us a lot of resources to accomplish these expanded learning opportunities. And the purpose of it seems to be that we can make sure that every student has the same experiences in these TK to 6 grade levels that every student has. Not every student has, either be because the family doesn't have the resources to enroll in Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, or we can't play an instrument, can't rent an instrument or hire an instructor. We could certainly have an instructor come in, be it one of our teachers or a private instructor to come in and do music lessons at TK6. So every student can really have the same experience regardless of the socioeconomic background, that they're really going to get to see what they like and what they don't like to do.
Which benefits everyone in the long run when you give students opportunities, even at a young age. And of course, we want to continue with our academic tutoring and intervention during school, before school, after school. The sites work on those plans and what works best for their site. A lot of our high school kids do the tutoring part because they play sports and it just works out better with their schedules. So that again is going to always be a focus. Any questions on this? Came directly from those meetings that we held, our community meetings and our stakeholder meetings.
Yeah, I have a couple. On the pathway for newcomers up at the upper levels, I think Nancy Caton used to teach a class like that at the high school. Will
Yes,
we
she
be
did.
adapting some of her, but not necessarily her, but what we learned in that program as we move that forward? Will it be a similar thing?
Yes, we want someone that can develop language while the students are also learning content. So that I actually talked about having that in the past. That was a program that worked, and I think that we could learn from that.
Cool. And then for my 2 cents, make sure that we throw aquatics on that after school opportunities list, because that's going to take some work. We'll have to move kids on a bus from distant campuses and whatnot, but we have a pool and we can get them drown proofed now.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
Another part, would we be able to help parents who are also the newcomers who are not?
We do that through our adult ed, and which is also in our LCAP. We offer an ESL class and we offer a high school diploma class, a GED type class for our adults.
Continue that.
We would continue. We've already signed up and done our MOUs, and we have that ready to go.
Have we ever considered a parenting skills class in our adult ed curriculum?
We have not held, not that I know of a parenting skills class, but we have had parenting skills classes provided by the sites. and the Center for Human Services. And one of our mental health clinicians actually held some parent sessions this
Good.
last year that were available to all parents in the district. She had 3 sessions, I believe, at the high school, but it was open to all of our parents.
Excellent.
Well, my question, and it's sort of a rhetorical question. I mean, maybe you do have an answer. We provide or make available tutoring in the after-school program, particularly for high school kids. Pardon me. But it seems to me that well, let me begin by asking, how many people take advantage of that?
I would have to have Mr. Pruitt address that. I know we offered tutoring at the high school this last year.
Okay.
So we can get that information for you. We can even email you that information or email the board that information. I think the important thing about the high school is each student has a different need. It's a little bit more difficult to have like a 3rd grade intervention. I can pull those kids and put them in a group. It's not the same at the high school. So there are some things we're trying to do in the LCAP that I think might help with that question too.
Well, the reason I was asking that is I was thinking of a child or a young man that I know, and he's not in this district, he's over in the Bay Area, in an affluent district. And I was talking to his parents about, whatever his schedule was. And he's I thought, and I believe he is, an excellent academic student. They've got him earmarked for several Ivy League schools. But what surprised me was that his parents said, and then he has, we've got him signed up for calculus and Spanish tutoring, because even though he's in these AP classes, we want to make sure he blah, blah, blah. And I thought to myself, well, that's impressive. I mean, obviously they're paying for it. It's not something their school district's providing, but I then sort of thought of my own son. Well, if I had said to him, I've signed you up for this calculus tutoring and that Spanish tutoring, would he have even gone? I guess I could have, physically dragged him. But I guess I'm saying, how do we motivate somebody who really has, is thinking to themselves, what, 245 or 255, school's over and I'm done. And yet we know, or somebody in the school district knows, his counselor, his math teacher, his Spanish teacher knows that he would benefit, or he or she would benefit from a tutoring session. And I guess what I'm saying is, how do we get them over to tutoring, and how do we make it attractive enough that they actually take advantage of it?
So we're looking at study hall in a restructured different way. So one of the actions you'll see in the LCAP is to decrease the number of students in a study hall to no more than 25 students. That will right away set those study halls up to be tutoring supports also. So for example, I'm not saying this is how the sites YOLO or the high school is going to do it. So I'm just going to give you an example.
Okay.
Don't hold me to it. But let's say that one of the math teachers at the high school has 25 kids. Because of schedules, it gets hard, but we might look at strategically placing, and I know Mr. Pruitt and I were emailing about this, kids who need math support in that class. But we also could look at kids saying, I've got study hall 5th period, but my math teacher's doing his study. I'm going to go see if I can get some tutoring from my math teacher. We're just trying to find a system where they don't have to stay after school for it. I'm on the football team. I don't want to stay after school for tutoring, but I need support in math. So it's not completely fleshed out yet, but what we're trying to have the sites do, both ORSIMA and YOLO, is lower our, and this, Mr. Posey proposed this at one of our cabinet meetings, so we're working towards it, is lower our study hall numbers to 25 and use study hall in a different way. I don't know everybody's.
What we'll be doing with extended cabinet here in a week from Wednesday is to revamp the look of what study hall is. Right now, is it fair to say some study halls have 50 kids in them? The teacher is no more than make sure you're sitting there at that point. By getting it down to 25 per class, that teacher becomes that parent de facto, if you will, and would start advocating for that child, watching the grades for the 25 kids, 90 minutes, 25 kids, very doable, right? And also, like Ms. Bencourt said, if there's another period open, or if there's another study hall teacher that period and they're having expertise in a certain subject, it'd be very easy to say, oh, I happen to know Mrs. X's has a study hall this period. You could go get help from them. So it's within the day. Because I'll agree with in your example, your son's case. By the end of the day, the kids are tired. And the more we can do this during the day and during the time that we've allotted for the education, the more success we're going to have in that. And the study hall, I know when I said it to many of the administrators, it was they took this year's version, which was fine. It was just a lot of kids. And it's like, we have to blow up that concept in our head. It's gone. We're going to revamp it to be more of I'm going to be looking at those kids' grades and progress, not just academic grades, but iReady assessments. And are they falling behind? Does something seem like to bother them that maybe I need to get counseling for them? We're really going to take that role, that parent with those 25 kids. So we're going to revamp that.
My grandson went to the after school tutoring, been a number of years. I don't know if it's changed or not. But, he's a kid who would not go unless I was taking him back to class. So he'd go in the room and then I sit by the door, to keep them in there. But the deal was the teacher that's assigned to that, they could do basic help if the kid has to ask for it.
Yeah, sure.
But if it was something in calculus or something like that, and if it was like a biology teacher who was on duty that day, they're not going to get much help,
And that, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, it was a noble effort. The teacher there, you could, if you wanted to get something done, you could do it there. But it'd be better, like if you had a math teacher or kid needs help, they go, visit the teacher in that field to study.
I think some of the problem happens, and I mean, when I was in high school, they did some other things. I wasn't quite, in 8th grade, it's kind of hard to say to you, what do you want to be for the rest of your life? It may not even be here by the time you're done with high school. We have to have them get excited about other positions other than maybe being a teacher, just quote the word teacher, or a math person or an art person. We don't let them know what a profession really needs or wants. They don't even know what's available. And, like forensic science, unless you watch something on TV where they're using forensic science, it's like, well, I have to know biology, I have to know chemistry, I have to know this. Our students are kind of pigeonholed into, quote, the old way of what school was. Somehow we have to get them excited and show them professions that are available that aren't going to go away. Like if you like digging in the dirt, okay, maybe archaeology, but what is there available for them and what do they have to learn? They don't just learn how to dig in the dirt, they have to learn chemistry, biology.
And that's the concept really of this TK5 elective piece too, is that it's going to be very broad, right? The art, TK2, grades TK2, you'll take an art elective, you'll take an ag elective, you'll take a theater elective, very broad. And then as you move into the 4th, 5th, it starts to narrow a little bit. And then we say, well, if you liked this particular discipline, if you will, then this is what the middle school offers in terms of electives. So there's maybe 3 or 4, right now there's 3 choices in the art world. You take ceramics, you take drawing or art.
Yeah.
And so you get more specific. And then when you get to high school, that's where the pathways come in, where we make those pathways almost like majors in college and say, if the high school student gets 12 electives, I think, in their career, or 14 electives in their career, we could really, it's more electives you have in your major when you go to college. And so you could really get specific on the training, where if you're saying art, by the time you get to high school, once these pathways are completely built out, TK12, you could really be, I'm going to be graphic art. I'm going to be, sculpture. I'm going to be, design. It's more specific. And with those pathways, part of building that literature is this leads to a profession here. These are the good universities you would go to out of this pathway. And
That's
so
what they need.
it really focuses you. There was a study done a few years back where, the problem a lot of students have now is they pick the college where they want to go. Then they see what degrees are offered at that college. Then they choose what they want to do with their life. And it should be exactly the opposite. You should pick what you want to do with your life. What major do I need to do that? And then what is the good college for that major? And this is kind of designed to get them more into that mindset. I know I want to do this, or I know I don't want to do this, which is another valuable thing to find out. I thought I wanted to, but I don't. We have to have means for them to switch as well.
There was another part. One of the students was really interested. He wanted to be a professional baseball player, but he just thought all it meant was he had to play well. He didn't realize the physical part and the mental part, and that you had to have something more than just being able to hit a ball. You had to know how to control your life and how to travel without parents around. And it was very, very interesting to watch this panel of adults and young adults explaining to these other students what they have to do. It's not just, well, I'm good at bowling, so I'm going to be the bowling champion. They had no idea that, they only saw the dollar signs that would go with it.
And just to kind of wrap up, Mr. Bazar, with your question, I think it's really important that we understand that high school students are still students. They're not adults. And we need to sometimes make them do things during the regular school they may not want to do, but they do want to play football or they do want to be in a club. So that's all after school. So if you want to do those things, some things need to get done during school. So I know as a parent, I was that guide for I'm sure you all were too, but not all students have that. So we need to take some responsibility for supporting those students throughout the day that need some sort of support or intervention, and not just say, well, just come whenever you want to, because they won't come.
Right. That's sort of the point of that question. I was, in preparation for this meeting, I was looking at different sort of strategies that others have advanced, or how to catch kids up because of the COVID and other reasons. And it seemed like tutors are, one group is pushing tutors, another group is pushing extending the school day so that you have a longer school day, you have, or more school days, actual extreme, extending the school year. And the idea then is that you are forcing, again, more educational presence and effort and blah, blah, blah. And, both camps have their advantages, I suppose. But what I kept thinking of when I was looking at our report and tutoring is that motivational question. Because again, my son's friend, or my friend's son, is motivated by the fact they're paying for it. I mean, he's also motivated by the fact that his parents are going to yell at him, but that's the parents' motivation. They're putting out a lot of money, so by God, they want to see him actually sit there and listen to somebody talking Spanish. But that doesn't necessarily work for all the kids we have. I mean, some of them are very self-motivated. We've had examples, I think, in our student reps. And, if everybody was like that, then we don't have a problem. But everybody isn't like that.
Right. And that's,
I just hope that and this sounds like a good beginning to make Study Hall a more meaningful experience, because we got to do something to make them actually participate in the programs we're offering.
I agree.
I think we need to really define well what we want to accomplish. Mr. Bazar just raised a great point about taking some of our top performing kids and really helping them excel. And, we've had good luck getting kids into great schools, and let's make sure that they're very successful there. But why are we offering tutoring? Is it to get, kids below level up? Is it to get, all kids moving a certain step? But I think it's very important that we both look at and what do we want? And the same thing with the mental health that we were just talking about. Are we doing mental health to improve attendance? Are we doing it to have more stable relationships, between boys and girls in middle school and high school? Are we doing it because we want less fistfights? Those are each three different things that you could measure, but we need to measure those and ask if they happen. And I think, it comes straight back to the tutoring thing. If kids go, they're getting something that is relevant and working for them. And if you've got to drag them there by their ear, they're either not motivated or they're not getting a good quality product and we need to take it back and relook at what we're doing. I would suggest that something you could use as a measure for this new system of study hall is how many kids are getting promoted up the ladder. You know, my own daughter hasn't been in our schools for a while, but she was really held back by our system. You know, I think I could do a higher math class. Oh no, you stay back with us. And, you know, she had Kathy and I pitching a tizzy, and she, you know, that worked for her. We need to be pitching a tizzy on behalf of these kids whose folks don't know what a calculus genius is, much less that they've got a 4-year-old or fourth grader who's doing pre-calc. You know, that kid needs to be pushed ahead. And looking at how often our internal staff is pushing kids ahead is a good measure of how successful you guys are being in what you're describing as your goals.
So one thing that Mrs. Robles and I are going to be doing is tracking our non-promoters from 8th grade throughout the next 4 years. So basically, we're going to look at after the first year, who the F's in English, and any student that did not become a real sophomore, if that makes sense. They don't have the credits to be a sophomore. We're going to track this group of kids over 4 years. And I'm sure we'll learn something each year, but if you fail English in 9th grade, you are already on a path to not graduate. And you go through this whole credit recovery, concurrent, and that is really not what's best for students. So how do we keep them from failing English in 9th grade? And then how do we ensure that a freshman has enough credits to be a sophomore has enough credits to be a junior? So we have met, we have a meeting tomorrow to kind of flesh some of this out, but we have to start tracking some of that data to ensure that when kids get to their senior year, it's not a mad rush to graduate.
And those questions and our research on that's possible because we have the coordinator of secondary education and the coordinator of primary education. So now we have dedicated employees that are set forth to say, is this program working? And it's not a dichromatic yes or no, right? It's kinda, and how do we make it better? And so it's a constantly evolving. How do, this is what we're going to do? What are our vital signs for success? If we don't reach those vital signs, what do we do to get there? And it's going to be constantly evolving. We have an idea of what it should look like in 3 to 4 years, but that's based on what we know today. Hopefully by December, we know more, and that might change what we think it'll look like. So it'll be a living type of program.
Mr. Posey, Mrs. Robles had something. Do you want to go up to the mic? If you don't mind, is that okay?
Just with what, is it on?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine if that's what they're after.
Well, Mrs. Ben was talking about it. We're actually looking also at the 5th graders.
Yes.
Because we do not want to have whatever situation happened this time around with our non-promoters. We want to be proactive. So we'll be looking at 5th grade data coming in for students that are doing it, and we'll identify whatever the needs are and work with administration, make sure that we develop those interventions or supports that are needed also for
Thank you.
not just the board with the students right now being promoted to 9th grade. We want to start earlier and work on the students going into.
And Mrs. Robles has already been asking a lot of questions, so we're good. We're going to be set with data, I have a feeling.
With me, I've been relatively quiet. How many 8th graders didn't walk because they didn't have their credits this year? Roughly 20,
70.
70?
It was closer to 70 than 20. Yeah.
Holy moly.
Or even a little bit more.
They're all in summer school. They get in
They're-
front of a computer now, or
They've been asked to go to summer school. Well, they've been told to go to summer school, but there's really not a hammer for that. You know what I mean? There's a carrot in that you can't participate in sports and those kinds of things. But for right now, I believe we have good attendance at the non-promotion. We'll see how that holds out as the summer goes on. They tend to drop out, but we've focused in, we have 3 good instructors doing the summer, what we're calling it STEP. They believe it's STEP. But what I think where our focus is really not intervention in math or science, because really what these kids need is organizational skills. They need to understand why they're doing what they need to do. They need to understand how to get help. They need to understand how to, why do you need to turn in your homework and how much percentage of your grade and how that affects your overall average. So it's really more about acclimating the kids to how do you be successful in high school?
Skills.
Yeah, life skills, exactly.
And so that study skills class, or we'll call it
Success 101.
no, for YOLO, the study skills
STEP.
class
It's
is also a 25 cap where it's been held in the cafeteria this year, and every seat full with one teacher. But that's just a placeholder. Let's be honest, that's what that is. So next year it'll be 25 cap, one teacher, 25 for exactly that purpose. These kids can't slip through for 3 years and then, oh, by the way, you're not promoting. Okay, I'm going to ninth grade. And we need to address that.
We're just defining what our next workshop should be. So, that's been kind of a thing with me, and I drug literally my grandson through Orstemba. Orstemba did a good job, but it's like everything from the tutoring, after school tutoring. It's like I would text my grandson and say, how's after school tutoring going? And it's like, oh, it's going great. I got all my homework done. And I go, that's funny. I'm saving the class. You're not. So
You have to have parents be active participants.
So to motivate, it's something that I never found a solution for, in all the years I'm in. There's all motivation, carrots, something there, and maybe, parents too,
Sanger Unified did a good job finding that solution about 15 years ago. And when I came here and I saw the study hall set up 6, not 12, it's an element they didn't even have. They had after school, too much to Mr. Pizarro's point, to getting the kids from the class to after school was the issue. And they never had a solution. They said, I wish we could offer this inside the class period. And as soon as I saw the high school and YOLO's study hall, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the golden carrot. That's what nobody else has thought of or funded. And that's the big thing. It's expensive. I mean, let's be point blank about it. It's costing, but we got the resources now. And much like I said, during COVID, how we do things after COVID needs to be successful because we've never seen this level of funding before. And this is one of the areas we really believe we're going to be successful is really revamping that study hall. And what they're doing at YOLO for the 7th grade study hall is it's not going to be a TOSA study hall teacher. It's going to be, there will be a history teacher during study hall period, a period of study hall. There will be a math teacher. There will be so it does allow you that movement like we talked about instead of just having a teacher. And now they know what they're talking about in their classrooms. They know what they're talking about, in their lessons, where they are in the modules, where the kids are struggling. They'll know how to read the I-readies to get those questions at 90 minutes every other day for 25 kids. So it is very much expecting great things out of that. And again, we'll adapt it. I'm sure, it's not going to go 100% as planned. Nothing ever does. No. But it's a really good start that I think will be looked at by a lot of people when we see the results. We'll see.
And this is not a lack of teacher willingness. The teachers at the high school, and I'm sure YOLO too, are very willing to support students. It's a lack of having a structure in place that allows them to do it. So I know Mr. Pruitt and his team will work hard on developing that structure. And with only 25 kids, it's going to be, I'm sure they've had a lot of scheduling. He's worked hard on his schedule, but
to be 100%. This is cutting out on me. Be 100% clear. You guys have just heard about it before the principals have. So it's coming. It's coming to extended cabinet. But the what fors and wheres. So I'm already getting text messages from principals.
Yeah.
The what fors and hows. That's part of what I call EC15, our extended cabinet on the 15th. That we'll be talking about this and exactly what we want it to look like. So,
yeah, I never had a problem with the teachers that were. Problem was with my grandson and his parents before I got a hold of him in the 9th grade. And I think our approach is we've got to do what we can with our resources that we have. And I think the teachers were a great resource. But then at 3:30, they go back to their family, and unless there's some way to make a difference there, it's just, particularly if they've already gone through 8 years of school and aren't successful, then suddenly they're in the 9th grade and you know, got to get them enough credits to get through high school. It's just a very tough job.
And I think that's been the driving question in cabinet is how do we make these successful regardless of who or what the family situation, like the home situation, like the
Oh,
parents.
that's right. It's like, you gotta-
Because we have to do also for foster youth.
Kid has to, I mean, I got in trouble, I got written up a lot of times, but a lot of times I would say, sorry that your parents suck, but you're gonna have to take, the initiative on your own to learn how to do this stuff. Because otherwise you're gonna be out here, living in a cornfield as well.
I've seen where in schools, and it's not the best, it's not the program that parents want to hear about. Parents go, your child has to go, you go, we'll meet you on Saturday. And I've seen administrators go pick up the parents.
Yeah.
You go, whoa, changes your attitude.
You ready for slide 2?
Yes, I am. There's not a lot of slides. I'm ready for slide 2. Edward, I don't think it's working. Oh, no, it is. Sorry. Okay. Oh my gosh, I gotta go back. Sorry.
While you're going back, I will point out that perhaps we need to think in terms of a specialty for this study hall of being that life skills, study skills, advocacy person, not just an academic subject, but some of these kids are going to need that person in their corner or that mental,
One more.
not necessarily a trained mental health, but that auxiliary mental health support.
Well, absolutely. And that will be part of the focus. It's the social economic, it's the mental well-being, the organizational skills, the academics. It's really, they should take that parental and locus, idea and say, I am going to be, the academic parent of the kid or the educational parent of the kid, which would include the mental health as well.
So basically, I'm going to go through the actions and just give a couple of highlights. They're all in more detail in the LCAP, and you can, just go to those pages if you want to see the actions for next year. But for goal 1, which is to prepare kids for college and career, we offer a broad course of study. We'll be adding an art teacher at YOLO and at the elementary. We'll be continuing to develop a CTE pathway that basically starts in kindergarten through 12th grade. We know CTE is high school, but we want to start the kids off young. And we will be purchasing a new elementary science adoption that I think we're really excited about. I think I brought that to you a little bit earlier this year. We'll continue to focus our professional development on math, writing, and special education. Of course, we do other professional developments, but we're really going to continue that focus from last year. And new teacher support will be ongoing. See if I do it the right way. Edward, can you just do the next slide? Thank you. So we purchase supplemental resources to our core. We're going to add another grade level, 2nd grade, to our Wilson reading system that has been a great success. We've gotten great feedback from our K-1 teachers. And then we will be continuing to focus on writing with Jane Schaefer at the high school, step up to writing at YOLO, and then Nancy Fetzer at the elementaries. We have PDs, for most of those things already lined up. Intervention and support, continue to increase intervention programs at the elementary and the secondary. Add an intervention teacher at YOLO, and this is where this lower study hall class size would support intervention at the secondary. We English learner support, again, a real focus on increasing support to students who are new to the country and just entering our school system at all grade levels, but especially at the secondary, but also continuing our ELD, our support for our, level 1, 2, 3s, and 4s that are already in our district. Special education, professional development. We did a special ed parent night this year where we focused in on things for just parents of special ed students, like what is from an assessment plan to an IEP, how does that work? Our parents are invited to attend what they call CAC meetings, at the county, but they can't get there. It's in the evening. So we're doing our own version of that here. We did 2 nights and we'll have at least 3 next year. So we didn't get a lot of parents, but we're going to continue to hopefully build the capacity for that. And then of course, it's ongoing collaboration between special education and general education. And extended support here again with the at-risk students, after school interventions and interventions within the school day at all grade levels. We continue to monitor, and support our schools facilities, retain teachers. There's, information in the LCAP. It's very, very brief on those 2 things. And then develop that career and technical education pathway is another. We added that as a separate action so that we could really focus on that separately. So that's a new action that we did not have. It was always been in the LCAP, but we actually pulled it out and put it as a separate action.
When you're talking about the LCAP, you want to address the data and the years.
For the metrics for
this is correct me if I'm wrong, a fillable PDF. So when it says year 1, we don't have really control what that heading says. It really should say 2021 data. Is that correct?
Right. So the metrics that we are using for this in this LCAP is 2021 data. So for example, the suspension rate is 0% because we were on distance learning in 2021. Really didn't suspend any kids. You'll see more normal data, if you want to say it that way, more what typical data, I should say, next year when we're measuring what happened this year. Goal 2 is just engagement. And that's kind of what we've been talking about, spent a lot of time talking about how do we engage our staff, our students, and our families. So our actions, our parent involvement, the sites do a great job of offering second cup of coffee, special ed parent nights, mental health support, SSTs, IEPs, school site council. There's a lot of outreach to our parents in this community. Parent Square is another way we keep in communication with our parents. So parent involvement isn't the old fashioned, I'm going to come down to the school and be the room mother, which I had when I first started teaching in Newman. Parent involvement is, it's more like they're connected and they know who to go to when they have questions. They get their questions answered. It could be digital support, it could be email, but it's just really, it's changed over time what parent involvement actually looks like. The old fashioned room mothers and having time to volunteer has changed a little bit, but they still can be engaged in a lot of different ways. Extended learning opportunities, we have to offer and give access to students for our extended learning day. So basically our 9-hour day. And the way we give access is making sure that anybody who doesn't live within city limits and can't walk or near a school can get there by bus. So we have already budgeted, I believe, for 1 or 2 late buses, so that kids can stay for that Girl Scout meeting, or they can stay for the intramural sports and then ride a bus home. Where they live should not dictate their access. And then adult education. I think someone was asking about adult education. We do offer those classes. Social emotional support, constantly ongoing. And I know, Paul, you asked how it's measured. It's measured in a lot of different ways. It just depends. I think at the elementary, we're preventative. We're trying to prevent students from having some of the issues they may have with behaviors and social skills. As we get into the secondary, it's also, there's kids go through different things and we need to be able to address those. We have added another BCBA. We call them Big Buzz. That's a behavior specialist and a program facilitator. We had a lot of students coming back to school this year with a lot of, we're talking about our little ones, really struggled with the structure of school. If you think they hadn't had to do the structure of school for a while. So we want to continue to support sites with that. And then trauma-informed skills, that was kind of put on the back burner this last year because there was a lot more going on. So we will be looking at some training for that.
I know that question's come up, so I'll interrupt you real quick. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
The trauma-informed skills trainings, I've been through it. It is heavy and it is significant and it's very informative and I recommend it, but not this last school year. there was already a lot going on with the COVID world and the teachers trying to figure out how they're going to be able to teach and not going to be able to teach. So it's certainly on our docket for this upcoming year to do the trauma-informed skills training. And I know that was a district-wide goal, but I think I'd said that back in September or even August that I wasn't a favor of doing that this year. I think it would have just been too much of a psyche hit for a lot of our employees.
And then we'll participate in several surveys this year and to get input from our parents. And then health services has pretty much maintained. I think it's great that every site has somebody there that supports with their health services. That's all been through the LCAP over the years. So Edward, is that my last one? There you go. Any other questions? I apologize if I jumped the gun, but it's in there, so I didn't want to.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out to the board that,
Yeah.
it is still under development. We're working on this.
I realize that the state has completely hobbled us with their data rules and the fact that, we can't put down the suspension rate that we know until they tell us what our suspension rate is. But the idea of, and I mean, part of this is due to the fact that there's I don't want to use a colloquial term for it in a public meeting, but a match going on between various departments where one of them just says, hey, we don't want to see this stuff happen, so we're going to hog tie it and make it awful. I would really suggest that instead of using horrible data that doesn't elucidate anything, that we add our own column of projections. And just, hey, if it, put it on the top of the sheet that says if this is, if the number you see, there's no reason that we can't project what our suspensions were for last year.
This is a fillable PDF that we turn into the county for approval and we get the numbers.
So
from the county.
the state develops the template, and you cannot deviate. Like, they will tell us, they won't even let us do one thing different. You can't make any adjustments. I don't want you to think that we don't know our suspension rate. We've actually been monitoring it actually more closely this year than I ever remember. We know what our suspension rate looks like, but we report off of DataQuest, which is the data from the previous year. They give us our sources that we can use. So I don't think we can put it in this document, but that doesn't mean you can, we could always mention it in a narrative, but again, I hesitate to put something in that hasn't been state approved and said, we think we know what our suspension rate is, but they count it very differently. So it's really based on incidents. It's a whole CalPADS thing. Sharice is the expert in that. So,
and I'll agree, Mr. Wallace, 100% wholeheartedly. I was fortunate to sit in the room with Governor Brown when he introduced this idea of a local control accountability plan, local. And he said, if it's ever more than 10 pages, you're doing it wrong. And that's a direct quote from him.
it's 70. Yeah.
I see 42 of 70, and I applaud Mrs. Bentoncourt to keeping it to 70 because I've seen them go to 132.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, you're right. It says local. You think we'd be able to change the headings and all of that and do our own thing, but it goes to the County Office of Education who has to approve it. And they don't just rubber stamp it. Let me tell you, we get them back with corrections here, corrections here, corrections here.
Absolutely. And the template has changed. I think every year, Carolyn and I have been doing this. They give us a different template to use. So they set the template. The State Board of Education votes on the template. We have nothing to do with that. We're just.
Is there a different document then that we're using when we're working with our stakeholders and our parents and whatnot? Or is that the document that they're insisting we use now? Because that's a big change from when it first started and various districts defined what their LCAP and their LCFF would be.
Do you mean just like metrics that we have in the LCAP that we're always looking at different metrics? Sharice can pull data for us. I can email her tomorrow and say, what's the suspension rate as of today? So we have done that several times throughout this year. We have a special ed team that's actually looking at suspension rates and how to lower them. So the data is available to us in Power School. Sharice does a great job of pulling it whenever we need it. So depending on what we're looking at, we do have that data. Again, that might be a data workshop if you want to
That
see.
could certainly be
No,
like I
I'm
kind of talked
talking-
about us. Go ahead.
I'm talking about something completely different. This whole LCAP process is supposed to be an interactive process with parents and stakeholders in the schools. And if you hand them this document and say, oh, by the way, we're hiding the truth from the last year, and we're not going to tell you what it is.
We're not
We're gonna
hiding
have
the
a
truth.
conversation with them for 5 seconds, and they're going to say,
Because-
yeah, you're just blowing smoke.
Well, we're not necessarily hiding the truth. It's that we're just working a year in arrears as the LCAP has us do. I certainly think that what you're talking about would do very well in a state of the schools type of workshop, where if the board was to say, these are the topics we'd like to see covered, this is the data we'd like to see, could certainly put that together in a workshop and have that same conversation we're having here.
Okay.
The process was very, very interactive with, even in this room it was. And even before this room, when we met with teachers, when we met with parents, we met with, and there was a good interaction of what we want. I mean, some things up there we were surprised to see. And, okay, we listened to our stakeholders, we gave it to them. And that part, the L stands true. It's still local. I'm not sure where the control comes when they hand you a template. That's the part I don't necessarily get. But if it's something where you're like, I'd really like to know what the data is on, on suspensions, we can get you the most current up to date. We do monitor that closely, much.
I think what might help, Mr. Wallace, and I understand the 0% suspension rate, but I have flexibility to go in there and add 0% suspension rate based on 2021 distance learning year, which will give parents a clearer picture of why that is a 0% suspension rate.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying. I'm hearing what you're saying. So if they knew that, I mean, of course no one was at school. We had a zero, we didn't suspend anybody. So I think I can go in and add that. And that would actually, I agree, that would make it more clear if someone was looking at this and like, they don't suspend anybody. It may not trigger in their head that this is based on 2021 when we were out on distance learning.
Or even the board, not understand. I wish,
Yeah, I think that's,
instead of year one outcome, it actually gave the year. I wish it said 1920 school year, because if a board says we had 0 expulsions, well, wait a second, we had 2 expulsions in the last board meeting.
Mhm.
So how is that possible? That doesn't,
I'll go and
that
make
doesn't
sure I add
add
that.
up. But I don't think those are titles I've asked once before we couldn't change because it's a fillable PDF. We can only type in the white squares, not the
What they tell
not
us.
the shaded squares. So
We need a motion accepting the.
Yeah, well, are there any other questions or comments? Then I deem this. closed.
I do need to make one more comment, and that is, in some of our goals, this board, since we got back from model schools, has talked about prioritizing what we do, and the goals that we're listing are just make 10% improvement. Down the line, across the board, that's our goal in everything. And that's not following the concept of prioritizing what we're doing. And it also doesn't kind of relate what the data is, what we're trying to accomplish. And, for example, we're trying to make 10% improvements. The data that we have in there for both preparedness for college math or completing a career path is about 10%. So I'm kind of embarrassed that I couldn't remember how to do the math, so I had to do it longhand. That means that by the time our kindergartners graduate from high school, about 40% of them will be, not quite 40% of them will be completing a pathway and will be ready for college math if we accomplish our goal of 10% improvement every year. So I feel like I'm frustrated that this document that we're using isn't really doing a good job of doing some good planning. And I hate that the state has hogtied us into, using data that doesn't leave a real picture of what's going on. But I also want to make sure that we look closely at what we're doing and that we come back and prioritize. So I hate to, thank you.
I really appreciate that comment. It's much of what I've been waving a flag for too, and the sense that I think we do use this document for the purpose of what this is. The LCAP doesn't say that we don't use another documents that we self-evaluate how we did that year, which would be very closely tied to the superintendent goals. And that could be we're done with the state of the schools type of thing. This is what we want to look at, a workshop. It wouldn't be a speech. It would be more of a workshop. These are what, this is what we want to accomplish. How are we going to do it? And the board establishes those priorities. Then we come up with superintendent goals. And then we did a really good job this year. I'm writing the administrative evaluations right before I came into this meeting. And with that shared vision, their goals looked like my goals. And when they collected the data throughout the year, I could see exactly how they did on those. And the next year will be the same and the same. So all of that can be done outside of the LCAP. This is the compliance document for the state. Okay. Board could certainly say, this is what we would like to look at, what we would like to monitor.
Yeah, there's nothing in the law says we can't advance on our own agenda. I never, I'm retired. They can't do nothing to me now. I put very little effort into state and county reports and all that. I did just enough to keep some guy from showing up in my office, saying, hey, we need to talk about this. But spent a lot of time using our own data and our own results, local results, to change our style of teaching, And then I just looked at the county and the state as, it's kind of like getting a sticker or something in your sock, it's irritating me, and they have no clue. But we have to do it to get our money and our financing, but we'll help kids somehow. So we can branch off, and we don't necessarily have to, follow all this stuff. I mean, put too much effort in something that we can't use is a waste of time and money, so.
Bureaucracy. But we can, as a district, go into it with a parent or a student or our, principals, our department heads, and say, this is what we've got now using our data. This is superfluous. We can
Spending
make
so
it
much
fit
time
up.
on suspension data during COVID, God, that's a joke. Come on now.
Mhm.
And we just killed an hour here,
Yep.
Okay, are there any other comments? I'd like to close this part of the public hearing for the LCAP, and it is 6:04. Okay, I'm going to open up the next public hearing on the 2022-2023 budget, and Mrs. Mendoza, 6:04.
And before Ms. Mendoza started, I just want to kind of first thank Ms. Bencourt for doing the
Yes.
LCAP report.
Thanks.
A lot of hours spent into that. Also, I had a scheduled day off on Friday, and I understand that the report changed on Friday because new stuff came down from the state. So I say that not for any other reason than to highlight how quickly the information you're about to receive changes. We're giving you the latest up-to-date information as of probably 4 p.m. today, assuming nothing happened in the last 2 hours. So there you go.
Okay, Edward's gonna have to help me out with this one too. So I miss the good old days of Governor Brown, where what he said in January was what we got in June. And
Right.
not a lot changed. And I feel awful because this is the second year in a row that I've come to you at this meeting and said, I really don't have a clear picture. And I apologize for that, but you'll kind of see why. So there's a lot of money that came back through the May revision. He's proposing a $300 billion budget. And he's hoping to combat inflation by pumping more money into the economy. but he's trying to address a lot of issues: public safety, homelessness, transforming public education, and climate change. But transforming public education, thankfully, is not as broad as it was in the last couple of years, because we're all a little bit tired of transforming. I feel like we should be like going into a phone booth and coming out dressed as something else, but we're trying to, but things that he is doing are guarding against a crash that like we saw a decade ago. Go ahead, Edward. So the major themes is inflation is affecting all of us. I mean, if you bought gas this week, you've seen some inflation. So he's trying to help out through rental assistance, childcare subsidies, and part of one of his initiatives is realizing that what the school system really is subsidized daycare. And so expanding that as we can and making it meaningful. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So he's doing a lot of investments that really we don't talk a lot about the GAN limit. The GAN limit is basically that what's collected in taxes it's kind of a balance in the state budget. So, but the more money you put into public education, that has to come from somewhere. And so he doesn't want to put it all toward the GAN limit, because then eventually he'll have to rebate to the taxpayers if it's out of balance. So he's working on that. So in the May revise, there are a couple of different things and a lot of one-time investments. And so when we talk about local control, I feel like the local control part of the LCFF is really eroding, because we're getting more and more money with strings attached. Governor Brown had gotten rid of almost every categorical program, and now we're back to lots and lots of really restricted, very small pots of money. So he proposed a discretionary block grant, which would take care of all the back mandates that are owed to us, to the tune of about $8 billion. Basically, this is an unrestricted, one-time, do what you want with it. Your board will decide how you want to spend this money. They had some recommendations, but ultimately it would be a board decision. They'd also just put money toward deferred maintenance, which we haven't seen in a long time. Our deferred maintenance right now is paid out of our routine and ongoing maintenance, which is 3% of our expenditures. That the general fund contributes to that, and about 0.5% of that is supposed to go to deferred maintenance. So there's a difference. You can see just looking at the LCFF funding increase from January to May, nearly doubled. And so that the COLA went from 5.33 to 6.5. And then there were no discretionary funds in January. Now all of a sudden there's $8 billion. So there's a lot of counter proposals between the governor's May revision, the assembly has their own proposals, and the Senate has their own proposals. So what they're talking about with this discretionary block grant, the assembly is proposing instead a learning recovery block grant, very specific, lots of things attached to it, and no mechanism for determining how much money that's going to be, how that'll be calculated. So we can't figure out any of that. The Senate wants to do something similar, but they want to give $10 billion over multiple years. So, and then $5 billion in enrichment. So all very much strings attached, whether this is a local, something that that we feel it's a need or not. This is what's coming down. So this is what they're arguing about currently.
So if the governor's vision becomes reality, that gives us about 4.5 million is about what they're thinking in the discretionary. Is that the right number? The proposal I would have for that money is simply facilities. And the next board meeting, we're going to talk about, I'll have a presentation on the Northwest Newman development and its impact on the school. And they're going to have a school district. They're going to have 3 phases of the development. In phase 1, we will be able to handle all the growth comes out of phase 1, except the high school will need classrooms. And so putting another 8 classroom building in there on their campus would seem to be really good use of that discretionary money. So we can get them the housing they need for the increase in students. They're already pretty much at the limit now with the 8th grade class coming in as a pretty full class, 272 or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we have 3 roaming teachers now, so giving them some classrooms. It's a 60-40 match on new facilities. I understand it's 100% upfront and then a 60-40, but we'll talk later about needing to ear tag some money because we're over the 10% mark, and that's where I would see that going as well.
So say again, the money amount. How much money?
4.5 million in the discretionary, and we have some other funds we'd add to that. I forget what he said, about 8 million for the budget.
8 billion.
No, what did our
Ours is
contractors
about,
say?
oh.
The budget for
For
it
a,
was 6.5,
yes,
6.5 budget, no, 5.5 budget, 6.5.
Yeah.
That's what he said. So the 4.5 go a long way to get to that.
So you're thinking about putting all that into school facilities,
The discretionary, yeah,
yeah,
the 4.5.
the 4.5, yeah, if the governor gets his wish, not his way.
right.
And you're thinking about the high school with that.
For phase 1, now phase 2, we would need a new elementary school entirely in that new development, and that would be the developers would provide that. Again, though, with the 60-40 match, we still have to front all the money on that, and then we get it takes about a decade to get refunded from that. So,
Probably.
yeah, I would say that the immediate need. And I do not have the timeline. I will have it later this week as to how long between phase 1 and phase 2. We could be talking a decade there. I don't know. They haven't been able to pin that down yet. The land itself isn't even annexed to the city yet.
Oh.
So I'll have a presentation next board meeting on week from tonight on specifically those 3 phases and what it looks like. But phase 1, which is going to be sooner than later, we probably want to get moving on.
Phase 1 this year.
Phase 1 is this, we haven't annexed yet, so it's probably still 2 years away, I think is what they said in the 2+2 meeting.
Sounds right.
But still, we need to be considering that we want to be ahead of the
Phase
game.
1, 2 years down the road, and phase 2.
We don't know. I'll find out later this week. Yeah, probably more like 7 or 8, I think. Yeah.
So for LCFF funding, the governor and the assembly and the senate have very different ideas of how to do this. So the governor's looking at probably a 6.5% COLA, more or less, to increase the funding. And that's applied through the existing formula, which increases the grade span allowances as well as the supplemental and the concentration grant funding, not necessarily to the base. The base would affect every district. The supplemental concentration really just affect the districts that have high concentrations. The assembly is proposing 15% COLA for the LCFF, which increases and then it also increases the number of students identified as low income, because there's one proposal that's getting tossed around that would include homeless students as unduplicated, and it would also anybody, instead of the free and reduced lunch guidelines that the National School Lunch Program uses, California would go to a measure of the federal poverty level. So if a family was identified as being 250% of the time of the federal poverty level, and I think that would increase the number of eligible students in our district, looking at that number. And then the Senate's looking at a permanent ongoing increase. So in the differences, there's ways that they want to get to this number. So I talked about the legislature wants to do basically an increase to the base of 16.2%, and including the homeless number and the low income families. What he proposed as far as the ADA number on how to generate the funding, the average daily attendance this year took a hit for a lot of districts, including ours, because of the mandatory 10-day quarantines. Kids were absent a lot. Our attendance rate was in the 80% this year. Usually it's 95.5. So that took a big hit. So the Governor Newsom proposed a COVID mitigation language on how to calculate mitigation for this year, and then taking a rolling 3-year average for next year and the out years. And you could basically apply whatever was the highest. If it was your actual funded percent, or one of these other options, the district took the best one and figured it out from there. The legislature proposal takes that out completely. The discretionary block grant has a lot of strings attached to it. They think the learning recovery block grants should be used for salaries, benefits, and employer contributions to pension. And it takes that funding out of the multilingual school and classroom library grant and the literacy educator grant. So they're taking money out of the classrooms and putting it towards salary. It seems that there's pressure from employee groups that are pushing on that. The other part of it is what we call the extended learning opportunity program. This is the 9-hour day and the additional funding that's tied to that. The legislature proposed on Friday to extend the grace period for implementation. We were supposed to be fully implemented this coming year, we'd have one more year of grace period without being audited. And then the following year we would be subject to all of the compliance issues. They wanted to kick that one down one more year because a lot of districts haven't really done anything with it. So the ongoing funding would be about $400 million less than what we're projected to get from the May revision. So, but it would also changes the allocation formula. So for a district like us, we are over 75% unduplicated. We would receive $3,000 per targeted student. And that would mean any unduplicated TK6 student, we get $3,000 per student for this. This is outside the school day. This is the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's a lot of money. It's millions and millions of dollars. So there is also a one-time infrastructure grant for this ELOP, which is very specific, but we don't know how to calculate this number either. So deferred maintenance, and then in order to pay for these things, it's eliminating the deferred maintenance. It's eliminating math and science professional development and the community schools initiative. So which is really, it's very interesting on where this is actually going to come out and what we're going to end up with. So what's not in the May revision? Pension assistance, which pension goes up next year significantly, especially for PERS. Transportation funding, basically since the LCAP started, since LCFF started in 12-13, we haven't received $1 more for transportation. Transportation costs have more than doubled since then.
Mrs. Mendoza, with all of this gas that's going up, have we heard anything from First Student? I mean, raising their prices?
I have not seen their prices for next year yet. I don't know if you've seen them. So there is another proposal on the table to not next year, but down the road, to fully fund home to school transportation. The state is recognizing that it is a need. And so we know kids have to get to school. And so it should be a funded initiative. So there are a couple of different things that could help us out down the road. So that could make an impact. And then we'll be implementing universal meals next year. We've already done that the last 2 years. Anybody that wants to eat can eat. So some districts are concerned that that's going to have a negative impact on their unduplicated, because if children are eating for free, parents aren't going to be motivated to fill out a form. So we did really well actually this year. Our learning directors went into the study halls and called parents had their kids call home, and we took the information over the phone. So I'm confident that, and our unduplicated rate went up. So I'm confident that we can get that done next year as well.
Yeah, it should always strive for 100% completion rate on the forms for exactly that reason. Many parents
Yeah.
either, well, my kids aren't gonna eat the food anyway, so I'm not gonna fill out the form, or I know I don't qualify, so I'm not gonna fill out the form. Well, especially with the increase to 250% of the federal poverty level, more parents will qualify than they think
Yes.
they do. So we really need to make sure we get 100% of those forms returned.
And that number really has an effect, not just on the LCFF, but also Title I, our E-rate funding. A lot of funding is tied to that number. So where that number goes down, it hurts across the board. So we've made a lot of staffing investments to meet the LCAP goals, as Mrs. Betancourt mentioned earlier. We maintained all of the things that we added this year. And I thought we added a lot this year. Going into this year, I won't go through all of the lists, but HR's been busy. So we've maintained all of this list, but wait, there's more. So we've identified some new additional staff through the LCAP process, an additional TK5 counselor, which will help, this will make sure that Hunt has a full-time dedicated counselor, and we'll give a couple more days to Benita, or a couple of more days to Von Renner. So they'll have 7 days of counseling next year. They'll have a 5-day-a-week person plus 2 extra days, and then 3 days at Benita. And then we have an additional TK5 resource specialist and an additional one at the high school just for case numbers. We have a lot of special ed students and they're matriculating up. We have added 2 additional art teachers, one for the TK5 to add prep time into the instructional day for TK5 teachers, and an additional one at YOLO. And we'll be restructuring study hall. We've already talked a lot about that. And we've added some other support positions, and we're adding 2 additional TK as we roll out the implementation for expanded TK. And then we're still working on an additional intervention teacher for Von Renner and expanding the ELOP staff, because that program is just going to be enormous. And we added a parent liaison, which will help support parents navigate through different services. They're going to really be working closely with Center for Human Services and getting people support that they need, that they may or may not be able to access directly at a school site. So universal TK expansion starts next year. So the May Revise did have additional funding to lower the classroom ratios in TK. What they're expecting is a maximum size of 24 students and an adult to student ratio of 12:1. So that can be a paraprofessional, doesn't have to be a credentialed teacher, but there is certain credentialing that has to be in place, and they've given us a date for that, but I believe all of our people already have it. So there is this kind of just goes on how this will work, and it's based on the additional TK students that are enrolled. So there are things that are not included in the budget that's going forward. And there's going to be a lot of changes between now and probably August. So I factored in the 6.5% COLA. but not any ongoing increases to the base or any other proposed ongoing increases. There is no mechanism. The state has given us a template to calculate the LCFF. It's not terribly difficult, but FCMAT will revise it once all of the known things are, they could be revising it once a week at this point.
So what we're basically doing is areas where the governor and legislatures agree, we're budgeting.
Yep.
The unknown areas, it's just not budgeted because I'd rather add money to a budget than try to figure out how to take it out.
Yes.
And so at this point, it's just what you see in the budget is strictly where we know the common ground has been met.
So the deferred maintenance is not included. There was no mechanism on how to even begin to calculate what that would look like. And there's nothing for transportation because that was a legislative proposal. Although that would have probably a good impact for our district. So things that we did include was there is a one-time, the $1,500 per reported 21-22 ADA. And the reason I say reported is because there's the reported ADA, there's the ADA that uses the COVID-19 mitigation. There's several ways to look at it. So they wanted to be very clear that it's what our actual butts in the seat were. So that comes out to about $4.2 million. And that's a one-time, as the governor proposed it, unrestricted. So that's what Mr. Posey referred to earlier. So there's a current year adjustment of the 1920 attendance rate, which was for us 95.5% applied to this year's enrollment. This is the ADA, this is the mitigation. So that gave us a higher funded number if that actually passes. So then you could utilize the option for next year and the second year. You could utilize the option of the whatever's higher, your current year, the year before, or your 3-year average. So you run all those numbers and see what's highest. And then the extended learning opportunity as proposed is $2,500 per TK6. And so that would be about $2.7 million. And that's just based on the formula that was in the May revised. That's not the 3,000 per ADA or any other adjustment. So the multi-year projection, this is something that I've really been putting a lot of attention to, and it's been a little tricky because of all the one-time money that's ending. Some ends next year, some ends this year, some ends the third year. So making sure we're spending all of it, we're allocating it all out, and to make a clear picture. And as I told Mr. Posey earlier, it's always that fourth year that gets a little tricky. So there may be new factors that determine our ADA calculations once everything is passed. So I can use what I know right now, but that could change. There may be new factors that determine how the LCFF is calculated. And a lot of the big factors are the timeline for when we actually receive the money, when the money sunsets, I just wanted to put that in there, that expect changes from once it's and even I could see this happening even first and second interim. I could still see probably change. There may be changes coming down the road.
Mhm.
Carolyn, how late do we get payments from the state usually? A couple months?
No, it's been
on.
everything's been on time. He did away with the deferrals this year. So everything has been on time. The federal money
The federal special.
is where that is too. And something else I didn't really talk a lot about was special ed funding.
Yeah.
There are proposals at the federal level to do increases on special ed funding. Those are not included because we'll want to wait and see what that's going to look like, if that is true, that will be a significant impact, positive impact on our budget. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that and seeing what that comes out to. Now, there are risks because of what's happening with the world economy. There are risk factors for the budget, and inflation being the biggest one. Supply chain issues we are still dealing with. Just from food service, it's just been a wild year. The stock market, because the state budget is so dependent on capital gains tax, personal income tax, with the wealthiest portion of the population funding most of the tax revenue, the stock market plays a bigger proportionate role with the swings. And then the Russian war and the increases of COVID cases are still a factor. So the summary, this is where Mr. Posey and I were talking about ending balances. Because of the state has made all of its deposit into its rainy day fund, and it's at a certain level of general fund expenditures at the state level. Districts are now capped at having a 10% reserve. So what we can do, we always have 8% designated for economic uncertainty, which is, I feel, is a pretty healthy balance for keeping our cash flow positive. We can have assigned balances for a little bit more than that. So looking at next year, and this is just the projection, this will change, I guarantee it. So our 8% for economic uncertainties is just over $4 million. And then that additional 2% is what you see in the assigned balances. It's just over $1 million. So those two lines get us to 10%. The restricted ending balance doesn't really count because it can only be used for certain things. That's where all that one-time money is sitting. And so that will be spent down the next 2 years. But there's a committed balance, and that committed balance is anything over the 10%. The board will need to decide how they want to commit those funds, whether it's actually moving them out of the general fund into another building fund, or if it's just saying, and this is all will be done through a board resolution at unaudited actuals in September. So the board will have to advise us on what they would like to do with that amount of money to protect us from, I mean, it can be for, well, let's see. Okay, for the assignments, for example, we did technology infrastructure. So if we needed to do systems or something like that, there's a lot of things that we can do. Basically, that money gives us some flexibility.
So it's 7.7081014 that we need to have via board resolution assigned somewhere. So it's not just
Yeah, the board decides what.
And the board can move that back out of whatever that assignment is via another resolution.
Yes.
So
Okay, once it's assigned, it's there, but
you could then move it at a later resolution. And when does that resolution need to go? I thought it was next
September.
week.
No, September.
Oh,
because
September. Okay, so we have a
when
little
we
bit
have
of
the
time.
final number.
Okay, so we have a little bit of time for that.
Mhm.
That's the money I say for now that puts you right at what that classroom building would cost. I'd like to see that go into a facilities, especially knowing that growth's coming. I'd really like to get ahead of the growth. We already have 3 teachers roaming at the high school. I'd really like to get ahead of the growth, at least for phase 1. I know in talking with our architects, they say from green light to getting the keys to a new school is about 10 years. So we need to start thinking about phase 2 a little bit too. But that's not necessarily need to happen on June 6th of 2022. But the board should be thinking about where we would like to commit that balance. So when we come to a September resolution, and again, an October resolution could change it. So it's just would keep us from changing it without the board knowing about it and reallocating it. But I would really recommend, as we're really healthy and everywhere else in the budget, we've got the ELOP handled. We have what we need to get done handled through the extra monies that they've given us for COVID recovery. I think that 7.7 would be really well placed in a facilities fund for now that would help us start planning that 8 classroom building.
The facilities one, where that big part that used to be muddy that we put grass in, that's where that
Exactly
building
where
will
we-
go.
Yes.
Between the
Will we
classes.
use the same kind of architectural plan so we don't have to have it redone again?
It should look just like the J wing, except it won't have science rooms. It'd be 8 classrooms. is what
So
we're-
we don't have to go into spending money for.
Right. I mean, probably a little bit on some redesign, but not a
Right.
whole lot. They,
Okay.
When will this money be available?
So, okay, so this is the the projected ending balance for next year. But there will be, I'm pretty sure that there is gonna be money in September from the 21-22 budget to commit as well, that we will have to deal with. I don't have that exact number yet, because once we close everything, then we'll know where that number is gonna be. This is what we're looking at the end of next year. So again, that would be in a board resolution, but we're gonna have to do a board resolution every year that we're over 10%
Okay,
to
so
commit those funds.
that building, which we want to have done in approximately 2 years. Right, so we would
correct.
try to send it in just as soon as that.
We
budget
want to
is
start again,
solidified.
moving on it as soon as we know what the plans for phase 1 is. Again, I find that out later this week, and I apologize, just how the schedule.
No,
So how many
yeah.
teachers do we have now at the high school that don't have a classroom?
3,
3 right now. So
Yeah.
we'll start in August, September with 3 roaming teachers.
correct.
That sucks.
It does.
Sounds like,
And with, about another, and we've got a spike coming through with the 8th grade class being really big this year. A little bit of relief next year with this incoming 8th grade class. But I'll have the numbers for you precisely, but with an anticipation of another 80 or 90 students coming from phase
it
1.
would take a couple of years to get
To build it.
classroom going, right?
We should start it when they start thinking about that developing, because when they start selling
Well, that's what
houses,
I'm saying. If
Yeah.
we got 3 teachers now that are, walking around with a cart. And yeah, we need to start now.
correct.
Basically, when the budget is approved, or we just
We would get our architects.
put
working
it
on
in
it
as
quickly.
quickly as we
Yeah.
can.
Plus,
We haven't got the architect going yet. Right?
not yet, no, because we're still in,
Can't
do we
do it.
reserve the funds yet?
Well, why can't we do it? Why can't we get the plans going?
We can, if that's the will of the board, then certainly we can.
Well, it seems to
Yeah.
me that this is kind of a matter of urgency,
Right,
So I think, this is not the right place, not the right board meeting to discuss it, but I think we ought to get started on that,
yes.
kinds of things. Think you
I
need to-
just want to, I want to
do
throw
that.
my 2 bits in for a review of what our overall facilities plan is, because I don't want to build something at the high school and then find out, well, that doesn't really fit with the way, when we go to 9th grade at YOLO or something. When we change what we need for our educational needs. So I want to make sure that we have a solid look at what our facilities plan looks like and what kind of buildings we build, so that we don't turn around in 5 years go, oh, darn, I wished we'd have thought of that. So I would like to have a good solid look at what our facilities plan looks like. How many kids belong in an elementary school? What do our educational desires lead to on a facilities plan?
But we weren't planning on moving 9th grade to YOLO, right?
I'm making up examples of things
You'll
that,
see me
boy, you'd
panic.
be in a,
I don't like
You'd
junior high
be-
to begin with, but
yes.
putting
It
9th
it
grade.
wasn't on my radar, but now it's a blip on the outer circle of it.
Well, let me give you a better example. Earlier in this conversation, we talked about the community schools, which is a process of putting like healthcare facilities and things like that on school campuses. It was a grant program that was going to be available. Were we looking at applying for that?
It's not on our radar to apply for it.
Okay.
No. It can be, but it's not.
They look cool. I don't know that we want to get into that business or not, but we should be thinking about it on a whole long-term planning kind of thing. There's one in Grayson, if you're driving past and want to see what one looks like.
When was familiar with it? When was the last facility master plan completed, Carolyn?
I will have to go back and check the date. It's been a couple of years.
This for
But
Barry.
a lot of this information he's looking at would have been in the developer fee master plan.
Developer.
Or
fee.
that was just done in April.
So perhaps a presentation reviewing that
Okay.
would be.
And I want to try and get back past just, we're going to have 600 first graders and get to, do we want first grade at the same place as kindergarten, or do we want them with second and third grade? Because those really change how we build a school and really change how our educational program happens. And if we just wait until we say, oh gosh, we've got, a school's worth of kids headed at us, let's throw another one in without thinking through how we want that to support our educational goals. That's the goal that I'm chasing, because you can't do that when you're trying to get a school built in the next 10 years kind of thing. You've got to be out ahead of it thinking, well, what's the right number of kids to go to an elementary school?
Okay.
Yes, it's a good time to ask if, if this is the phase one or whatever you're calling it for the building in the classroom, and we have monies coming in, what the current rental rates are for portable classrooms.
When we talked with the architect, they said they're not even recommending those anymore because they're so expensive compared to buying them. That by the time you rent them, that you're better off
You're absolutely.
You're talking about
having started
renovating
construction.
or renting?
Rental,
Leasing. Oh, leasing.
yeah.
Yeah, we still have a couple of
lease.
leases, but
You pay for the infrastructure to be able to power them.
Right, yeah, right.
Yeah, and I don't. And when I addressed that question with the architect, and he discussed, he does not recommend, he goes, better to start now. You're going to end up saving money over time. Same exact thing. By the time you put the pad down, by the time you put you might as well be building the building. So that's, he said a few years ago he recommended it, but now it's not even on the recommendation. of that.
Well, again, we have an immediate need, and we're talking reasons why we can't do something, till like 3, 4, 5 years down the road. But I think, you do have to have the infrastructure, but doesn't mean you can't use the same infrastructure when you move those classrooms out and start building a new room. I mean, I've done that. I've bought and used classrooms, or, if you get lucky, you find a mobile classroom company that's having to go someplace to pick up classrooms that school's given up. And if you can catch them at the right time, they'll bring them to you cheap or free if you buy them cheap or lease them.
I keep thinking of the horror that we have right now at Von Renner with all those that we can't use
Well,
or get rid of.
Years ago, I said, let's get rid of those, tear them down,
Yeah.
get rid of them.
And then we
Fire
have to
hazards
condemn them
anyway.
in for a while.
So it's the wrong board meeting for all this, but
Yeah.
you're bringing up questions.
Sure.
Right.
We're bringing up questions like we have teachers up without classrooms, and how are we going to fix that? And we don't have an answer here. We may get money somehow. The architect says, don't do this. And, phase one's coming 2-3 years down the road. In the meantime, we've got kids without classrooms.
Which is why I think we don't wait for phase one to start that project. That's the kind of the point of putting that in, that saying, no, that 7.2 is going to go. And if it ends up getting covered with developer fees, well, then it just backfills the money we already spent. So, that can happen. There's a few strategies in that. I do think this is the right board meeting to have this conversation. And then the next one, I'll actually give you the numbers.
Well, the next couple of board meetings, we need to have a plan, let's
Correct.
get something going.
Yeah.
Correct. I'll know more. I think my meeting with the developers on Thursday. I'll know more about that at that time.
so as you can see, having all this one-time money just sitting in the balance, and the reason we did it that way was to really be able to have the plans that we had in place and all of the things that we wanted to do with this with this one-time money, spread it out as far as we could. And really, they gave us about $13 million. And we really wanted to make sure, see how long we could make that last. And with the things that we have in place, whether it's the additional intervention teachers, the just different supports that we put in place. But with that said, this will kind of sits at the bottom line. So you can see why this will go up. And so we'll have to address that as we go forward. Part of this big reserve is that one-time funding that we're looking at, but for both the ELOP and the one-time $1,500 per ADA, that $4.2 million, and that's in the next year. So Fund 13, planning for next year, we're looking at a full return to normal. We did almost back to normal this year. So everybody can get access 3 meals a day at no charge. And then, but we forecasted the revenues based on traditional national school lunch reimbursement rates. I believe that there will be, the state will put in additional funding for that, for the universal meals, but we wanted to be as conservative as possible. So we're making a lot of equipment investments at Von Renner, or Simba, and Bonita this coming year. Actually, YOLO as well is getting quite a bit of new equipment, and then we'll be working on getting the new kitchen at the new multipurpose room ready to go as well. And then for the building fund, we did issue $14.5 million of bond anticipation notes in March. And so construction is underway at Oristemba, and planning is well underway for the Von Renner multi-use and TK classroom renovations for those two projects. And that will probably use up most, if not all of those funds. So the next steps that we have will be, the state will be adopting their budget on June 15th. We will be adopting our budget 2 days before that. So most likely we'll see a 45-day revision in August. Any other questions? That was a lot of information.
Is there any?
No,
are there any
No, I think you close the hearing.
We are going to need a workshop.
Same process every year.
Yes. Mr. Wallace, do you have, I don't know if he's still there.
If you have any desire to be doing some advocating with our legislatures, let me know. I was sat in on a lobbying call with Senator Caballero the week before I came down here. Really should reach out to Adam Gray as well. And I have some of that interest from some of my other delegates. So I may be trying to set something up. And certainly if you're in the mood to call, I can let you know, for example, transportation, there's two proposals. One's a much better proposal, and I can give you bill numbers and stuff like that. But we did have a really nice call with Senator Caballero. She seemed very responsive. Of course, she won't be our senator next year, and Adam Gray won't be either. We'll have 2 new people with completely redistricting stuff. So,
Mr. Wallace, will you be back for next board
I'll be
meeting?
back for next meeting. Yes, I'll fly. Well, if all goes right and the sun shines, the creeks don't rise, my plane comes in on Sunday, and I'll be there for the meeting on Monday.
Okay.
We expect an accent by then.
So I close this open, a public hearing at 6:50. Whoop, on time. Okay. May I have a motion to
Adjourn.
adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
May I have a
I'll
second?
second.
Whoa, okay,
Let Paul do it.
okay.
There you go.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I
Opposed? Okay. 4. 1 absent. Okay.
Oh.
Okay. Nancy, do you want,
More questions than Answers.
All right, Nancy, you're expecting me at the